Hello, my friends. The story of the day from Egypt. Protagonist of today's story is Nahed Qafas, the owner of the most inspiring story for filmmakers, and a film was made about her called The Woman and the Cleaver. But her real story has nothing to do with the film at all. In 1981, Nahed Qafas was living with her family in Alexandria, a modest family with limited financial means. At that time, Nahed was 18 years old and had just finished high school. Nahed was beautiful, and anyone who saw her would give her more than her age. Nahed dreamed of changing her life and living in financial luxury. Therefore, she refused any suitor who approached her because of her simple financial circumstance. Until a suitor from an Arab country older than her by about 20 years proposed to her, but he promised to secure her future on the condition that she live with him in Cairo. She married him and moved her life to a luxurious apartment in Cairo in one of the most upscale neighborhoods there. From that moment on, Nahed's life completely changed, and her relationship with Alexandria became very limited, restricted to occasional visits to her family. The marriage lasted for 5 years, and during that time her husband was not stable in Egypt, always traveling to his country for work and coming back on separate vacations. Nahed was always waiting for him, and she gave birth to a daughter from him who was her only child. But after a while, she no longer felt comfortable with this life. She felt that she had sold her life too early, wasted her youth, and did not feel married, especially when her husband was absent from Egypt for long periods. Nahed asked for a divorce from her husband. Her husband was a respectable man and agreed to the divorce after she repeated the request several times. To secure her future as he promised, he registered the large apartment in Cairo in her name, also registered a car for her, and set up Tarshan. She had a large sum in her bank account, in addition to the jewelry and gold she owned, which was valued at more than 100,000 Egyptian pounds. The total value of what Nahed owned at that time would be equivalent to more than 15 million pounds in today's time. The divorce took place in 1986, and Nahed settled in an apartment in Cairo with her daughter. She began to feel lonely and longed for a romantic life where she could feel her youth. One day, she booked train tickets to visit her family in Alexandria, wearing many jewels on her hands, appearing financially comfortable. This caught the attention of a man sitting nearby, named Ilhami Farag, a businessman, or as he introduced himself to people. But he was the biggest con artist you could ever know in your life. Ilhami was residing in Alexandria and had a striking appearance. By the standards of male beauty at that time, Ilhami was considered handsome. He approached Nahed and introduced himself in a very elegant manner, which caught Nahed's attention. He portrayed himself as a businessman with many investments in Alexandria. Nahed was impressed by his way of intruding into her privacy, and they conversed. Ilhami learned from her the most important details and information that were important to him, such as her being divorced, having wealth, and her family being modest. He made her like him. And when they arrived in Alexandria, he insisted on driving her to her family's house in his car, because he had left his car at the train station garage. He took her home phone number and asked her to meet, and Nahed agreed and felt that the world was compensating her for everything she had missed. They met more than once, and Ilhami talked about his own projects and investments in Alexandria. After a while, he asked her to marry him, and she agreed immediately. After a short period, he asked her to invest her money, explaining that there was no benefit in money without investment. He also asked her to grant him a general power of attorney over all her possessions, stating that he would manage her money and put it into a variety of different investments that would help her make money and increase her financial amount. Nahed felt very reassured by him, and he made her believe that he had entered into a variety of different projects. In reality, Ilhami was executing his plan. He sold her apartment in Cairo and bought a villa in his name in the King Mariut area in Alexandria. Took her car, all the gold and jewelry she had, and sold them. Even reached her bank accounts and started withdrawing money from them. Nahed began to feel that the way he was treating her had changed, and she noticed that many people were coming to the house asking him for money, claiming that he had scammed them out of large sums of money. He convinced her that these were enemies of success, and they saw him as a successful businessman and investor, and wanted to tarnish his reputation by all means. Until Nahed discovered that everything had been taken from her, and she had fallen into the hands of a fraudster. She no longer owned anything, so she went to live with him in the villa he bought with her money. She considered seeking a divorce, but he promised to return all the money he took from her. In fact, Ilhami had other intentions. He wanted to seize the remaining money in Nahed's bank account. He attempted to do so more than once, but he failed because Nahed became aware and took precautions to protect her assets. Ilhami started treating her very poorly, provoking her with words, and she was forced to continue hoping that she would regain any of her possessions. One day, as she was descending from the villa to buy groceries, she heard her daughter screaming. She quickly returned to find her daughter's clothes torn and Ilhami attempting to assault her. She quickly thought that any action could harm her and her daughter, so she hid her daughter and accused her of being at fault, telling her to pack her clothes because she would take her to live with her grandmother in Alexandria. At that moment, Nahed decided to take revenge on Ilhami for good. She went down with her daughter and took her to her grandmother's house in Alexandria, then returned to the villa in King Mariut. Ilhami was taking sedatives and various types of drugs. Nahed prepared a juice for him with a sedative in it, and when he fell asleep on the bed, she took a knife and began stabbing him. Each stab was for a reason. Once when he deceived her, once when he attacked her daughter, and once when he ruined her life. When she was sure he was dead, she decided to get rid of him completely, so she brought an axe and dismembered him into small, unrecognizable parts. Nahed cleaned the villa thoroughly, put Ilhami's dismembered body parts in a large travel bag, took it down at night, and placed it near the sea, before returning to her mother's house in Alexandria. 2 days later, people found the bag, opened it, and discovered human body parts inside. Chaos ensued, and the authorities were informed. They found a severely mutilated body that was difficult to identify. The authorities faced one of the strangest cases at that time, a dismembered body in small parts placed in a travel bag and left in the street. Unfortunately, at that time, there were no surveillance cameras, and the authorities struggled to identify the body's owner. Eventually, they found a complete hand, lifted fingerprints, and discovered it was the body of Ilhami Farag. The investigation into one of the biggest public cases in Egypt at that time began. The authorities found that Ilhami was married to 2 women, one living in Alexandria with a daughter, and the other being Nahed el-Qafas. The first wife was interrogated, and all witnesses confirmed that Ilhami had been absent for a long time, and she denied knowing anything about him. Nahed el-Qafas was summoned, and initially denied knowing anything about him until comprehensive investigations revealed details about Ilhami Farag. Known as a swindler who had been married 17 times before, deceived everyone, and took their money. The security men discovered that what Ilhami did with 17 women before was the same as what he did with Nahed el-Qafas. At the same time, the public and the authorities were pressuring the security forces to swiftly capture the person responsible because it created a state of fear and anxiety in the streets of Alexandria, where people feared a murderer was killing and dismembering individuals, then leaving them in this manner on the street. After confronting Nahed and questioning her multiple times, she confessed to the crime. However, what was strange was that this was the first case where the public and the street sympathized with the killer when they learned about Nahed's story and what Ilhami did to her. Investigations proved that he had deceived Nahed el-Qafas, sold all her possessions, and attempted to harm her daughter. As a result, the death penalty was reduced to life imprisonment for 25 years, then further reduced to just 15 years. Nahed became the first accused of a heinous crime to receive support from the public and the authorities, and not a single kind word was spoken about Ilhami Farag. And thus, the story of the day ended. Peace be upon you.